off everybody last week.
It's a little light. It could have something to do with the beautiful sunshine. Let's call it
That's
beautiful
true.
sunshine, probably.
Or, everybody lost an hour of sleep. So
let's call it a daylight savings time.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll let some folks kind of move in here. And so we'll leave the doors open for a minute, but we'll get them closed here in a minute. So in case you weren't with us last week, or even if you were and just need a reminder, we started talking last week about sharing Jesus. And again, if you haven't been a part of our Insights classes before, this is our third installment of this. And on our website, if you go to flagstone.church, we have a tab up in the top right corner, right on the first page of our website, that has, it's an Insights label, and you click on that, and drop-down menu will give you all the different classes that we've had. But this morning, or starting last week and this morning and going over the next couple of weeks, we're trying to get some deeper insights into actually sharing our faith, having spiritual conversations. And so, we talked, even after class, Brandon and I both talked with some people about, almost like not even thinking about like how we need to take a deeper look into that.
Right.
It's almost one of those things you're like, well, yeah, you need to talk to people about Jesus, but do we really, and why? And so anyway, that's where this conversation started last week. And last week we spent a bunch of time talking about just kind of the status of our community, specifically what we labeled as unchurched people. Now, you can have a lot of different definitions of what it means to be unchurched. But what we're talking about is people who either have never gone to church on a regular basis before, never had really a church experience, or they might have been a part of a church in the past and have stopped going for whatever reason. And then, what are we doing as a church family about that? Do we even recognize that there's a lot of unchurched people in our community? And I think that kind of goes, we don't pay attention to that sometimes. We assume we're here in the Bible Belt, and there's a church on almost every other corner, and so everybody goes to church on Sunday. I grew up going to church on Sunday. You did, so everybody else does, right? Yeah. And so sometimes we don't recognize the sense of urgency, and just recognizing there's a need in our community for people to hear about Jesus or to hear about a church family that they can connect with and be a part of. So that's where this whole conversation stemmed from and is going. And again, if you missed out on that information last week, about just, where we're at, how we currently, just in our country, just in America, we are on a steady decline as far as people who call themselves or who identify themselves as Christians. We still call ourselves a Christian nation,
right?
But we're starting to lose that identity,
less than half, right?
Right? Yeah. So, and even with the unchurched folks, we discovered a lot of those folks had some kind of church background. Right. They grew up in what they would call a Christian family, or they grew up going to church at least on a semi-regular basis, but, not anymore. And so that's what we're trying to address and really provide ourselves with some skills and some insights to start having some of those conversations and at least get more comfortable with inviting people. So this morning we're going to turn the camera off of the unchurched folks and kind of turn it on ourselves a little bit and be a little bit more introspective and recognize kind of where we are as far as having those conversations go. So
when we think about people that don't go to church, people don't have a relationship to God, and we think about how to help them get a relationship to God, we call that evangelism, right? That's probably one of the biggest church words. There's nobody that doesn't come here on a regular basis calls it evangelism. So if we call it sharing Jesus, when we talk about those two things, what comes to your mind? What kinds of methods come to your mind to try to evangelize or share Jesus?
What kind of methods have we used like in the past?
Yeah.
And not even necessarily, you may come from a different church background than the Church of Christ, but what have you seen churches do to try to evangelize, to try to share Jesus?
Door knocking. All right. Yeah. Does anybody not know what door knocking is?
And it's okay if you don't.
Yeah. In the olden days.
Did you ever go door knocking?
Oh, I did.
Oh, me too.
You had to have a pamphlet.
Yes.
So that when they open the door, you could say, "Hey, we're doing a gospel meeting. Please come."
Before they shut the door.
Exactly. Very awkward. Yeah. What else? Say that again. Friendship.
Okay, friendships, building friendships with people. So build friendships, and then as a part of that friendship, you invite other people. Okay?
I thought we had another one.
Yeah, we did. Mission trips.
Yeah.
Like still in the States?
Yeah.
Yeah. Foreign mission trips too.
And I'll pick on us a little bit more there. We often have more efforts down in somewhere else than we do in our neighborhood, right?
That's true.
Yeah. What else? Say that one more time.
Tent revivals.
Tent revival.
Yeah.
Wow, you're going way back, Jerry.
Hey, I've been to one. Anybody else ever been to a tent revival before?
Done it.
I've been to multiple denominations. Yeah, like I've been to a Church of Christ one. I've been to a Pentecostal one. Yeah. VBS.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Get the kids, you'll get the parents, right?
Yeah.
Billboards. That's true. Billboards on the highway.
You know, I haven't seen one in a long time, have you? No? Yeah, you used to see those.
Do it. Oh, well, that may not be necessarily the message that we want to promote, but yeah. Did anybody? What's the most recent? Anybody watch the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
What was the big thing during the Super Bowl? He Gets Us. Anybody see those He Gets Us ads? Yeah.
Go look up that website, by the way. There's some interesting stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Meals.
Invite people to your house. Mm-hmm. But we used to? Yeah.
A little less comfortable these days.
Yeah, she said just inviting people. That used to be something that people were more comfortable with, just going, hey, you want to come to church with me on Sunday? And it's not as comfortable anymore.
Yeah. In your estimation, how effective are those estimates? So if we talk about roughly half the population don't have an ongoing relationship with God, using that methodology or those methods, how effective do you think that would be? That's a good point.
How many of those methods are?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
some of them have gone away because they weren't producing anything. Mm-hmm.
And I do a terrible job of repeating, so I'm going to try to practice.
I'll do that.
Yeah, do that. Yeah, we didn't do very well on that one. Go ahead.
So the response was there was some level of effectiveness at some point, when those things were used, whether it was door knocking or something else. Why would you do them if they weren't effective, right? So there was, they had their season, to borrow your word.
Yeah. And maybe to couple off of that, so what would be effective now? So if that was effective then, it was part of where we were as a society, what would be effective now, in your estimation? Social media?
Mm-hmm.
Tech?
Just using some kind of technology.
Social events? Community outreach stuff?
What were you saying? Building relationships with people.
Relationships.
So figuring out what the need of the people that you're trying to meet, what are they actually like? They're either their felt needs or their actual needs. What's missing in their life, and kind of addressing that first, and building that relationship, and then sharing Jesus. Yeah, in the parable of the sower, there's different soils, and so even addressing what kinds of soils those are, and kind of trying to meet those people where they're at. Patience. Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. It takes patience. It takes a process. Yeah, there's nonprofits and different organizations that meet those needs as effectively, or sometimes even more effectively than the church does. And so, why would they rely on the church for those needs when they can find that need met somewhere else?
So if we turned the page and we had a room full of people who don't have a relationship with God in here, what would they tell us? What y'all have been saying, or are there other things that they would say, hey, here's what you got to do?
What do you think they would say is the most effective method? And it may be some of the things that you guys share.
Maybe
What do you think? The tech part?
Technology?
Yeah.
Go ahead, get it.
Listening to people?
Listening.
Yeah, so with your job working at a convenience store, you got to listen to a lot of different people.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether you want to or not. Yeah, but listening to people.
Sometimes in the wee hours of the morning, right?
That's right.
Which
that's
people
right.
get a little more open those days, or those times. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what we're going to address this morning. So
Let's
go ahead and jump into this. So that I told you guys a lot of the research that we're looking at, and you can look on the handouts that we handed out, which if you didn't get one, we've got extras. Just raise your hand
Jeremy's
up.
got a stack.
Jeremy used to, or Mike can grab it. I don't know.
He put them down. Sorry, Jeremy.
Anyway, we can get one to you if you didn't get one when you walked in the door this morning. But most of this, as far as statistics and stuff, is coming from the Barna Research Group. There's one thing that I shared on this handout that if we have time to get to it, that came from Relevant Magazine, but the rest of this information comes from the Barna Research Group. So Barna did a survey of what they labeled as non-Christians, so people who not only don't go to church, but they don't even believe in Jesus. They don't identify themselves as a Christian. And of all the different methods that they were given, there was, just like if you've had a conversation, a spiritual conversation with someone who was a Christian, what was or not even necessarily a conversation, but I guess anyway, what was the most effective method of that? And you can see on the slide up here, when I came, this is what their statement was. When I came away from this kind of encounter, I was encouraged to explore Christianity further. So whatever the encounter was with information about Jesus, they walked away from that going, man, I want to know more about that. I'm more interested than before this encounter in hearing about Jesus. So look at the very top one, 71% of them. What was their response? Can y'all read that? I don't know if it's blurry or not. Casual one-on-one conversation. Yeah. Just a one-on-one conversation was the most effective, and these people that were surveyed, in causing them to want to walk away from that encounter going, man, I think I want to know more about that. That's the number one thing. 71% said that. Now, on the other hand, look down at the bottom. We got tracts handing out, information about Christianity and stuff. That 20% took a piece of paper from somebody, actually read it, and said, oh, I want to know more about Jesus because of this thing. Yeah. We see people on the street with the bull horns, talking or, saying whatever. That's like one of the least effective, okay? So look at all the different methods. Videos, we talked about the tech stuff, it had an impact. Seeing a person at church, going to maybe a Christian concert, those have some kind of effect, but what's the number one thing? Having a one-on-one conversation. Just and a casual one, not like, sit down, let me tell you all about...
You're lost, let me tell you how to fix that.
Yeah,
right?
But just with a friend, with a coworker, just a casual one-on-one conversation.
And I think some of the things that have already been said here, that takes time, right? That's not a one-time conversation.
Right. It's somebody that you've probably already built that relationship with. Now, this is not to say that, and we're not trying to imply that spiritual conversations are not happening. They are. And we have people who do know, unchurched people, non-Christian people who do know Christians at work, and they have those conversations sometimes. It's not like it's completely foreign, but they're not happening a lot, and sometimes, actually often, they're not always going that well, okay? So that's our next slide. Spiritual conversations, according to Barna, are happening 70% of the time. So, again, if the print's too small up here, the top line is asking, do you know someone? This is asking people who have no faith, non-Christians. Do you know someone who is a Christian? Do you know someone who is a follower of Jesus? 65% of them said, yeah, I do. 22% said no. 13% said, I don't know, which is probably, that's not good.
Right. That's Northeast.
But, yeah. So of those people, of the 65% that said, yeah, I know somebody who is a Christian, then you look at the next line, okay? Has this person ever talked with you about their faith in Jesus? 70% said yes. So that's great. Yeah. At least the people who, again, maybe our percentage of people is smaller that actually know or at least think that they know a Christian. Maybe that could be bigger. But 70% of them say, yeah, at some point, this person that I know that claims to be a Christian has tried to have some kind of conversation. So that's good, okay? Now, problem is those conversations aren't always going that well, and that's our next slide.
So, a lot up there this time.
yeah. And I know you can't read all the small print. The green is the positive response. The blue is the negative response, in case you can't see that, okay? So between each of the following pairs of statements, which comes closer to your feelings about this person sharing their religious faith with you? So again, this is talking to non-Christians, people in non-faith. When they had that spiritual conversation with a Christian, what was their response to that experience? Okay? I felt more positive towards Jesus or more negative? I wanted to know more about Jesus. I did not want to know more about Jesus. I felt closer to the person in question. I felt less close. I felt heard. I felt unheard. I wanted to hear more from this person. I don't want to talk about this again. I felt cared for, or I felt imposed on. So a lot of those are actually pretty close to each other. The one that I wanted to really draw your attention to is the second one on the line here. After this response, after this encounter, this conversation, did you want to know more about Jesus or not know more about Jesus? And 23% said, oh yeah, after that conversation, I want to know more. 43% said, I don't want to know any more about Jesus. So that's a little bit telling as far as, man, it's great that at least some point, a lot of us are having a conversation with a non-Christian, but how effective even are those conversations being? Like we may be struggling with making the connection and causing them to go, yeah, tell me more about this. So the question for that, and I think you can help facilitate this. This is one of these things. But like, why do you think that is? Why do you think that a lot of these folks, not quite half of them, but a significant portion of these folks are walking away from that conversation going, and I'm done. I don't want to hear any more about Jesus.
Yeah. Thoughts on why that would be the outcome? That is too much. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, that dualistic thinking. What Kay was talking about is like we talked last week about how our method, even our evangelism method for a long time, and I think you and I both would agree this was our experience growing up too, is like dualistic. You got one choice or the other. You either give your life to Jesus now or you're going to hell. And you got to decide right now, you know, we're looking, we're watching, you know, make the decision, make the choice. And that is not effective, especially anymore nowadays.
Right.
And so
you think about some of those study methods, they started with, first you need to present the sin problem.
Right.
So you came on strong, like you're lost.
Yeah.
Something's got to change.
Right.
And
that's what Kate is saying.
Repels, right?
That's what Kate is saying.
Yeah.
We almost vomit too much information on them about our faith and about what they're doing wrong and how to fix it instead of just having a conversation.
Yeah. Other thoughts on why those aren't always?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. There's still a 23% out there that it might take in, right?
Yeah.
Back to the soil conversation. Right?
Yeah.
There's a few soils. It'll work.
But in case you didn't hear what she said that may be a reason why we struggle having those conversations now, because of a stat like this, because we even walk into it assuming, well, they're not going to want to know more anyway, and so why would I even try? Yeah. Why do you love the Cowboys?
Yeah. You've shared that with me more than once, and it hasn't worked.
and Chris, I don't want to hear any more about the Cowboys, so it's not working. But go ahead with your point.
Great analogy, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. How often do we go to a new restaurant? Man, I got to tell you about this place. Or we go to a movie. Man, you got to see that movie, right?
Yeah. But do we do that in those spiritual conversations? Do we have that kind of attitude? Yeah. So looking at your sheet that we handed out, the handout here, as far as spiritual conversations with non-Christians are concerned, I wanted to show this particular group of this particular survey to you, because I want you to see like how there is interest, or at least a willingness to have spiritual conversations. I think a lot of times we just assume that people like initially don't want to hear about our faith, and that may not be accurate. They may feel that way after the conversation. We got to work on that. But how a lot of people aren't necessarily just immediately turned off. Some of them are, but a lot of folks are willing to at least engage in a conversation, not a preaching act,
lecture.
but at least not a lecture, but at least a conversation.
Yeah.
But there's also this generational thing, both with people who are willing to have those conversations and people who are willing to initiate those conversations. And that's what I wanted to point out to you here. There's a survey that they did with non-Christians about just, having these spiritual conversations, these faith conversations, beliefs in Jesus, okay? And the first one there, I have had one or more conversations about my faith perspectives or beliefs with a close friend or family member of a different faith in the past year. That's not even necessarily Christianity, just a different belief system than I have. So these are people who are saying, I've had that kind of conversation with a Christian, with a Muslim, with a Hindu, with, I don't know, whatever other, belief system that you want to include. And what's interesting to me is the generational breakdown here. So Gen Z, which would be your, basically your college graduates just coming out of college, young adults. They've had those conversations. 74% of them have had those conversations. Your millennials, which is your late 20s to early 30s, almost 40-ish, are 70%. And then everybody that's, Gen X and older, 52%. And that's significant because on the positive side, I think a lot of times, those of us who keep getting older every year, those young people don't care about Jesus anymore, and they don't care about faith anymore, and they're all what we talked about last week. They have this moving moral compass. They don't believe in absolute truth, so they don't even want to have these spiritual conversations. And really, the opposite is true. It's more of us, 45 and older that really don't want to have those conversations. At least not as much as young adults and college age and high school kids. Yeah. So there's some excitement there, and I think a willingness. I think that should tell us there's a willingness, at least for some folks, especially our young adults, to at least have the conversation. Yeah. Matter of fact, they enjoy that. Yeah. They might not necessarily want to be told what to do, but they want to engage in the conversation, okay?
And I think it's interesting that our age may think they don't want to talk about that.
Right.
So we don't bring it up, right?
Right. And we're uncomfortable talking about it,
right.
So we don't want to bring it up. I have had, the next one, I've had one or more conversations about my faith perspectives or beliefs with a practicing Christian in the past year. And this is just with Christians. And remember, or in case you weren't here, what Barna labels as a practicing Christian is someone who goes to church at least once a month and considers their faith. They've given their lives to Jesus. They go to church at least once a month, and their faith means something. They say it means something to me. It's important in my life. Okay, how many of those conversations they have? And the millennial non-Christians say 64% of them say I've had a conversation with a Christian about their beliefs, and then older Christians we're trending down to 44%. The next one, a Christian has tried to share his or her faith with me one or more times in the past year. And it's 57% of millennials, and then older Christians, 51%. The last one, this is what, again, I want to kind of highlight. I'm interested in learning more about Christianity and what it could mean for my life. Now, this whole group is lower, which we already discovered from here. Sometimes after that initial conversation, they don't want to know more. Okay, but of those that do, 47% of Gen Z Christians say, I'm interested in knowing more. After that conversation, I want to have another conversation. I want to know a little bit more. Millennials is 36%. What about Gen X and older?
Yeah, not very good.
16%. Yeah. So I don't know if that's the people that are being talked to and they're like, I don't want to have that conversation anymore. Or if people our age and older are so bad at it.
Yeah, right. Maybe.
Or maybe
I thought about that angle.
We're just not doing that well with it.
I was thinking we just made up our mind, right?
Yeah,
we already
that could be it too.
Ain't nobody changing me now.
Yeah,
right.
That could be it too. Yeah. So we kind of wanted to share a little bit about just these spiritual conversations. So you can do this next part right here.
Yeah. So this first question, we're going to let it be introspective. We don't want to force you to raise hands and confess right this minute. We'll do that later. But how often do I take the initiative to engage in a spiritual conversation with someone outside of church or a group Bible study? So I want everybody just to ponder that in your inner mind for a minute. How often? Dave, I said to yourself. Hold on a minute. All right, now that we've pondered that a minute, Let's ask this next question. I'd love a little feedback here. And this one, it's not you, it's somebody else, right? And so it's a friend.
What causes somebody else?
Right, that's exactly right. So if we don't share as much as we would like to, what causes someone to hesitate to share? Where does the hesitation come from? Fear of rejection.
A rejection of the content or rejection of you as a person, huh? Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't want to lose this conversation, or I don't want this person to totally turn away from me.
Too serious.
Getting too serious. What do you mean?
Yeah.
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 We like talking about the Cowboys. I don't want to talk about this other stuff.
That's a good point, Cade. Right.
Yeah. I don't want to get to that level.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Fear of lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Anybody else got some thoughts on that one?
Right. We've already put labels on them.
Right.
And then because of the label that we attached,
right,
we already assume what
right.
their response is going to be.
Yeah. And I think you can carry that beyond there. We prejudge, is this person going to be receptive or not? Mm-hmm. And we decide, no, they probably won't. So
why even try?
Yeah, they're running around drinking every weekend. Why would they listen to me talk about Christ, And so it may be they're running around drinking because they need something, right?
No, and I appreciate you sharing it, but I think it's a valid point. We assume that they saw that he gets us ads during the Super Bowl.
They were watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so they've already had, somebody's already said something to them. Yeah. So they've already rejected. They've already said, no, why would I make the effort? Yep. Yeah, so it's different than not knowing enough, because you might know your story and you might know even answers to some of their questions, but because of the gravity of it, you don't want to mess it up. And we put pressure and even guilt on ourselves. Right. What if I'm the reason?
Right.
Because of how I handle this conversation, what if I'm the reason that they end up walking away? Yes, sir. Right. Yeah.
Better opportunity, right? This is not a great time.
Yeah. It's not a good time for them. It's not a good time for me. I'll pick a better time for it. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. For those of y'all who didn't hear, Jake was saying we become self-focused.
Right.
We turn and we make it about us. I'm the one that's converting this person, and their acceptance of this message is dependent on me. And we can't do that. We got to turn that off. And I totally agree. It's all about God. It's about the Spirit moving. It's about them being receptive to God's moving in their heart. I totally agree with that. The problem is, I still think, no, it's on me.
Right.
It's
I
like that, and so then I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
I just don't always. That's not always where I go.
That's a here versus here problem.
Exactly.
Right? Go ahead, Dave.
Exactly. I got to get this project done. I ain't got time to talk to them about faith. But that's honest, and I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Mark.
Those are the things we think and we don't say. So thank you for saying it. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. I only use about 100 words a day, so it's not going to be about that, right?
Just the fact that you said that out loud in this group of people is a big deal.
We're introverts everywhere, Mark.
Yeah. He said introverts, they struggle with having a conversation about anything, much less their faith. So we're going to run short on time. So I want to kind of move down a little bit. That you guys have said some of the most common things, and this is from a 2014 article in Relevant Magazine, the common reasons that, and this is what Christians say, this is why I struggle sharing my faith, having these spiritual conversations. We fear controversy and conflict. And so that can be, twofold. One is I don't want to get in an argument, and I don't want to mess up this friendship or this relationship. Or sometimes we're worried about, you guys got policies in your workplaces about what you can and can't share, and I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to create a controversy that way. So I got to be really cautious, and I'd rather err on the side of not getting fired,
right,
than having a problem in the workplace. Or we're ashamed. And what that stemmed from was, let's be honest, in certain circles, Christianity doesn't have a good reputation. Sometimes rightfully so. Christians have been unchristian in a lot of different ways. And worn, there's different groups that have worn the same label as us, and we're ashamed of their behavior. And we assume that everybody who has had that experience from those negative encounters, that they'll think that about us too. we're scared we don't know enough. We heard that a second ago. Like, do I know all the answers? They're going to ask me something I don't know, and then that's going to turn them away. Or it's just not a priority for us. And you guys kind of hint at that in several different ways, but like it's just not, there's other stuff that's more important. And maybe it's a project, maybe it's I got to take care of my kids and get them to practice. Maybe it's my own comfort zone, but something, whether I articulate it that way or not, is more important than having this conversation. So very quickly, the last thing, this will be our last slide up there, guys. Non-Christians were asked to imagine a Christian that you would be interested in learning from. And which of the following characteristics would you use to describe them? Yeah. So I'm a non-Christian. I'm going to have a spiritual conversation with a Christian. What character traits would I want to see and to experience in that person? Okay. And I was going to ask you guys what you thought the answers would be ahead of time, but we're out of time. So I'm going to go ahead and show you. They gave this question to different groups of people. So they asked pastors, what do you think non-Christians would say? So when you see these first three columns, they're asking these people, what do you think non-Christians, how non-Christians would answer this question? Does that make sense? Okay. So pastor said that the top things that they're looking for is cares about them as a person, listens without judgment, demonstrates interest in people's story or their life, exhibits a vibrant faith of their own, is honest about their doubts, and good at asking questions. That was the top 5 answers that pastors gave. This is what we think non-Christians are looking for. And then you see they ask the same question to people who just self-identify as Christians, people who they're not Christians, but they're part of another faith. Maybe they're Muslim, maybe they're something else, okay? And then the column all the way over here on this side is people who have no faith. They don't go to church. They don't have a belief in any other kind of faith system. This is how they actually answered. Okay? So you can just kind of see the difference, but I wanted you guys to see, and this is what's on your sheet here, what their top answers were. This is what I want to experience from the person I'm having this spiritual conversation with. Okay? And there were more, again, you see the low percentages there, but there were more answers and more responses that they gave, but there were a whole bunch of them, and Barna just kind of condensed them down to here's the top. All right? Listens without judgment. So I think it was Billy a second ago that said, sometimes the struggle in having those conversations or what turns people away from them is they don't feel listened to. They don't feel like somebody's just like sitting down, like, just tell me about your life. Yeah. Tell me what's going on. And like, tell me what you think about what it is that I'm saying without, oh, well, you're a terrible person for thinking that. And at least coming across that way. So that's the number one thing, listen without judgment. Is honest about their doubts. Anybody here have doubts as a Christian?
Yeah.
I mean, I got brought up, I don't know if it was ever articulated this way in the Church of Christ background that I had, but you weren't supposed to have doubts. Ever. I mean, you got the truth right there.
That's right.
And I'm paid clergy, and I have doubts on a regular basis. There's stuff that I struggle with what God is doing or isn't doing and how He's working. And
right. How can this be the plan?
Right.
Thoughts,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people who have no faith, that's attracted to them in that conversation. When you're having a conversation with them and they start to express doubts about like who God really is, there really a God and how He's operating in this world. And they would like for the person who is a Christian to go, man, I struggle with that too. And to be honest about that, not to be like I'm being manipulative or fake, but actually say, man, that's a struggle for me. And let me tell you why I struggle with that too. They appreciate that, okay? I still hate, I said this last week, I hate the they. I'm like, right, I don't want to point at them.
Yeah. And I wonder if in that stat there's also that, like, I don't think I have all the answers. So I have doubts in that I may not be right about this particular interpretation.
Yep. Exactly. Doesn't force a conclusion. So this goes back to what we were saying before. Like our typical method was, here's the truth of the gospel, and you better decide right now. You're grasping by a string over the fires of hell right now. You better make a decision.
This deal won't be here tomorrow.
That's right. What's going to happen to you on the way home? That's right. So they would rather have an open-ended conversation. Hey, you want to talk more about that? That's of greater value, that you're not going to make me make a decision right now. There may have to become a decision at some point, but at least initially, let's just talk, and then I'll kind of think about it and chew on it, and then we can talk some more. Cares about me as a person was big for them, and then allows others to draw their own conclusions. I don't have to lead you to where I want you to go, which is the way my conversations tend to go sometimes.
Right.
I'm going to ask you questions, but I'm going to ask the right questions so that you kind of get to where I want you to go. And they would rather just have an open conversation. And it goes where it goes. And as long as we're building trust and a relationship with each other, we'll get to wherever we need to be eventually. Yeah. But don't draw my conclusions for me. Let me do that on my own. Yeah. So we need to wrap up.
Yeah, we
final
do.
Thoughts?
Yeah, no, exactly that. I think we heard a lot of this as we went through it. It's a process, and it takes patience. Mm-hmm. And relationships. And so, as we think about the next couple of weeks, that's where we want to go, is more of a how do we do that? This enough of the theory. Yeah. Now, how do we go to work? Yeah. Right? And so that's where we want to go. Any parting thoughts out there? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. If they did, I don't know what those are. So this is just the information that was part of this thing that Brandon and I got. And so I don't know all the details about how many responses there were and what all the different responses were.
That's love. Thank you, Fletcher.
For sure. And that's what we claim. Like, right. Let's love people, but are we actually doing that? Right. And or at least is that a non-Christian's perception of us? Right. And that's where we struggle. So next week, I hope you can come back again next week. I hope you can bring somebody with you. We're going to get real practical, and we're going to talk about, here's some steps. Here's how we start engaging in these spiritual conversations. So I hope you come back again next week, all right? Thank you for being here this morning. Thanks for the comments, too. We'll start worship.